Thank you for the purchase of your new Variflex Trampoline. This video will guide you through the setup procedure. Setup will take about 1 to 3 hours and should be done with 2 people. Never allow anyone to jump on the trampoline until all these steps are completed. Begin by assembling one of the 6 W-shaped legs. Attach one leg extension with 2 holes to the left and one leg extension with 3 holes to the right. Align the holes and secure the leg and extensions by first adding a washer to the bolt. Then insert the bolt through the holes. Add a washer to the other side, then add the nut, but do not tighten at this time. Repeat this step until all the legs and leg extensions are assembled. Next, to assemble the top rail, slide the smaller end of one top rail into the larger end of another. Always make sure the spring slots on each top rail are facing up. Continue adding additional top rails in the same manner until you form a large circle. Joining the final segments together may require 3 adults in good physical condition. With one person holding the opposite side, bring both ends of the circle firmly together. Next, secure the left side leg extension, the one with 2 holes, into the T-connectors with the longer 4mm bolts. Add a washer to the bolt first. You may need to rotate the leg extension to align the holes for the bolt to fit through. Then slide the bolt through the holes, then add a second washer and a nut. Do not tighten at this time. Repeat this step for all the remaining leg assemblies. When finished, the trampoline frame should look like this. Next, with the stitching portion facing downward and the labels facing upward, lay the jump mat inside the frame and attach a spring into a D-ring on the mat. Always attach close-end hooks to the jump mat D-rings and open-end hooks to the top rail. Attach the initial spring into a slot on the frame. Repeat this step directly across from where you attached the first spring. Make sure that you have the D-ring that is the same number of slots away from the starting point on both sides. Note that the trampoline is under tension and effort may be required to attach the springs to the frame. Be careful not to slip or pinch your fingers, as serious injury could occur. Attach 2 more springs half the distance between the first 2. Count and make sure the D-rings and slots are aligned. Repeat the process of placing springs half the distance among the already placed springs. To even out tension, attach a spring opposite the one just attached. As you add springs, the tension will increase. Use the spring tool to safely hook the ends into the rail as shown. Once all the springs are attached, lay the pad cover in place. Position the pad cover so that each pad cover securing loop is centered between 2 D-rings on the jump mat. Now it's time to mount the enclosure. Note that the upper enclosure poles may be packed inside the lower enclosure poles, and you'll want to remove them before mounting. Attach the lower enclosure poles with the 2 square holes at the bottom to the right side leg extensions. Rotate the leg extension to align the hole in the T-joint with the holes in the leg extension so that a bolt can be inserted. Use long bolts, spacers, washers, and nuts as shown. Do not tighten the bolts at this time. If not already done, insert a protective cap into the bottom of each lower enclosure pole and push it in tightly. Next, slide one protective foam sleeve over each lower enclosure pole. Repeat this process for each lower enclosure pole. Next, slide a foam sleeve onto the upper enclosure pole and place the pole cap on the upper end, the end with the holes. Align the cap and pole bolt holes. Lay out the enclosure mesh so that the straps with grommets are facing outward. Place the strap with the grommet over the hole in the pole cap and align all pole, cap, and grommet holes. Insert the pole cap bolt as shown. Repeat this process for all the upper enclosure poles. Next, gather the mesh and attached upper enclosure poles and lay them out on the jump mat of the trampoline. With 2 strong adults, attach each upper enclosure pole onto a corresponding lower enclosure pole. It is important to completely seat each upper pole completely down onto each lower pole. The elastic top cord will need to be stretched when seating the last 2 or 3 poles, so use care when seating each of the final poles, as they will be under tension. Find the enclosure mesh seam that runs top to bottom, and pull it firmly down so that the seam aligns with the enclosure pole. Start with the enclosure mesh fastening loop to the right of the seam. Pass this loop through the jump mat D-ring immediately to the right of the enclosure pole, and begin sewing at this point. Tie one end of the rope off to the D-ring and thread the other end through the mesh securing loop. Remember, the enclosure mesh securing loops must pass down through each D-ring before the rope passes through the loop. The sewing sequence for the rope is to pass through an enclosure mesh securing loop, then a pad cover securing loop, then another mesh securing loop, then a pad cover securing loop, all the way around. Remember, enclosure mesh securing loops pass through each D-ring, and pad cover loops are positioned between each D-ring. To make the sewing process easier, it is best if one adult sits just under the edge of the trampoline and threads the rope through the alternating loops, and another adult, standing just outside the trampoline, is positioning the loops into their proper locations. Once the rope has passed through all the loops, pull the loose end extremely tight and tie it, securing to the same D-ring as the other end. This will securely bind the lower edge of the enclosure mesh and the inner edge of the pad cover to the jump mat. Bundle the loose ends of the sewing rope together and secure with a plastic tie. Failure to do this may result in serious injury, strangulation, or death. Now go back and tighten all the bolts. Install thread protectors on the threads and nuts of all the bolts. Pull the pad cover skirt down neatly into place. Push the lower foam sleeves upward so that the upper sleeves seat into the pole caps. Once these 2 steps are completed, tighten all 12 enclosure pole securing bolts tightly and install thread protectors on exposed threads. To secure the outer edge of the pad cover, pull the elastic strap, with the plastic clip on the end, outward between the pad cover skirt and top rail tube, and loop it back under the top rail and clip it onto the sewing rope. Your trampoline is now safely and completely assembled and ready for use. Enjoy!